السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا ما يهد الله فلا مضل له وما يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. أما بعد فإن خير الحديث كتاب الله وخير الحديث حديث محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وآتي ذا القربى حقه والمسكين وابن السبيل ولا تبذر تبذيرا إن المبذرين كانوا إخوان الشياطين وكان الشيطان لربه كفورا. Dear brothers and sisters, I have recited ayahs number 26 to 27 from Surah Al-Isra. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, and give the relative his right, and also the poor and the traveler, and do not spend wastefully. Indeed, the wasteful are brothers of Shaitan, and Shaitan is ever ungrateful to his Lord. Today's khutbah is on how we spend our wealth. And this is a perfect time to talk about this. I talk about this around this time every year because, November, December, the holiday season is a time where people spend a lot of money. A lot of sales, people go on vacation, spend a lot of money elsewhere. So this is just a reminder for myself included about how we should be spending our wealth. In Islam, when it comes to spending, when it comes to doing anything, we should be doing anything and everything with a discipline. This is a part of Islam. We always have a discipline in all of our actions, right? And so what does that discipline mean in this context in Islam? It means that, for example, if I'm going through financial difficulty, for example, or I'm just having a difficult time for some reason, as a Muslim, I'm still worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I have not stopped worshiping Him because I have discipline, right? My discipline is still there for the salah, right? I may not have my full heart into it, but at least I'm still doing the salah, right? I don't give up my fasting. I don't take off my hijab. I don't do these acts against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when things get rough for me because I have a discipline, alhamdulillah, right? This is the way a Muslim is supposed to be. However, unfortunately, you find amongst many Muslims, especially the youth nowadays, is that it's the opposite. Instead of, when they're going through a hard time, instead of coming to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, trying to get closer to Him, they go further away from Him. I mean, I've met so many sisters who have taken off their hijab, or they take it off and then they put it on again a few months later, then take it off and on, and there's no consistency. Why? Because they don't have the discipline. It was not instilled in them from the time they were young, from the time they were children, right? So many people I've known who don't have the awareness for their salah. Right? They sometimes pray, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they don't pray because they don't feel like it, or because they're going through a difficult time, or they just don't want to, because there's no discipline that was instilled in them from the time they were children, and it's so important. I mean, I've seen so many of these younger parents who they don't force their children to pray the salah with them. It's important that you do that, even if they don't like it, even if they complain, you still do that. That's what you do as a Muslim parent. because the discipline needs to be instilled in them. They're not going to want to pray. They have to pray. That's not. It's not about wants. It's about the requirement. But unfortunately, too many Muslim parents, they just don't see it that way, and then like, oh, my child will grow up and pray on their own. But they're not praying on their kids, so they have no reason to pray when they grow up. And then they come asking me, hey, why is my child not praying? I'm like, well, was he praying 10 years ago? Was he praying all his life, or did you expect him to start praying out of nowhere? So and they try, asking me to talk to their kids about, oh, tell them about this hadith or this ayat. I'm like, all the ayat and hadith. We all know them, alhamdulillah. Right? I mean, I can say all these things, but it won't make any difference because it was never instilled in them from the time they were children. So back to the topic at hand is the concept is discipline, right? So discipline, we are always obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We try to remain obedient to Him. Now, when it comes to how we spend our wealth, that's where it's a different kind of discipline that we're talking about. Because how do you discipline yourself in how you spend your wealth? That's the question. So there are two concepts in the Quran that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about. And the first one I mentioned in the ayat from Surah Isra. The concept is called tawdeer. Okay, and tawdeer is to buy what you do not need. Okay, buying things you do not need. And in the Quran, it refers to it as wastage. That you are wasting your money. This is a wastage of your resources, right? A wastage of your wealth. And what did Allah say? He says, those who waste the wealth, they are the brothers of shaitan. Right? Those who, not sorry, it didn't say waste of wealth, it just those who are wasteful. So wasting in general, whether it be wasting food or money or any of these things, these are the brothers of shaitan. This is a very strong statement from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? So when it comes to, this holiday season, as I was talking about, this time of consumerism, peaking, it's not just about, yes, we can talk about, buying things that we do not need, but it's, you go through the flyers, they all these companies, they send you all their flyers during this season, and they want you to look at things that you never would have looked at before. You never even thought about buying, but because it's a very good sale, oh, maybe I should buy that. Right? You didn't even need it. You probably still don't need it, but you see a good sale and it attracts you. It becomes appealing. Like, oh, hey, I can actually afford that. So this comes into our minds, and this is where the discipline must come in, that we have to control ourselves as Muslims. And this is a way to do is to remind ourselves what Allah is saying, that do not buy what you do not need. Right? This is wastage. And you do not want to be the brothers of shaitan. Among the brothers of shaitan. Now, in terms of wastage, like I said, it's not just money and product either. It doesn't have to be something you can buy from the store. It can be just how we spend our wealth. Right? And a couple of examples, and I think most, if not all of you, are aware of these things, is how, unfortunately, with the Muslim Ummah, we this is so widespread, is this excessive spending on things like birthday parties and overly spending on the weddings. And not, I'm not talking about the walima. I'm talking about all these unnecessary events that follow up with the walima. In the Pakistani culture, you have the mendi and the rosati and the bilking. I mean, you have all these events, and it goes on for like 2 weeks. How much money is being spent on these events that have nothing to do with Islam? They have no relevance in Islam. How much food is wasted at these events? I mean, subhanAllah, I mean, think about it. You're starting a marriage, which is supposed to be a beautiful thing, and you started off by wasting so much money, so much food, and all this. It's starting on a sin. You're starting a marriage on sin. SubhanAllah, I mean, this is unfortunately a very common phenomenon we see amongst the Muslim Ummah. It doesn't matter what culture you come from. All cultures have these similar things. It doesn't matter if you're from Morocco or from Egypt. They all have these unnecessary events, and this need to keep on spending and have these party after party and all these celebration after celebration, right? And it's the funniest thing is when I see these birthday parties, because this is something that's very new to Muslims because it's started here in America. And so many Muslims are, they're seeing that non-Muslims are celebrating their birthdays. And so they started doing the same thing, right? There's nothing in Islam that allows this. There's nothing in Islam in Islam, we only are allowed to celebrate Eid al-Fitr and Eid al-Adha. Those are the only celebrations we have in Islam. And then beyond that is the wedding and the specified celebrations in one's life. But beyond that, birthday parties is just not a thing. And so many Muslims, they don't just have small birthdays, they invite so many people. It's not just a couple of friends, it's the entire community for a birthday party. And this is very common. It's very sad to see this, but this happens even here in Richmond. I see this in Muslim communities here in Richmond. You know, it's hard. It's just unbelievable that this is. We think that this is okay, but this is not a part of Islam. We're violating the Quran here, but we're also violating the Sunnah of how we're supposed to sleep less, talk less, and eat less. And this is a really important Sunnah that we don't really adopt much anyway, but it's just a violation of all things in Islam, and we take it too lightly as Muslims, unfortunately. Now, Allah also says in the Quran, وَكُلُوا وَاشْرَبُوا وَلَا تُسْرِفُوا إِنَّهُ لَا يُحِبُّ الْمُسْرِفِينَ. In Surah Al-Araf, ayah number 31, a part of ayah number 31, and eat and drink, but be not excessive. Indeed, he likes not those who commit excess. Allah is saying, eat and drink, but do not be excessive in how much. Right? Do not be excessive, and Allah does not like those who commit to excess. So the scholars have named this as extravagance. So this is the second concept in Islam in the Quran. It's called israf, right? So tabdir is buying what you do not need. Israf is to excessively spend on what you do need, right? You need to buy something, but you spend way more than you need to for this thing. So this is considered extravagance. So we can talk about the fancy cars and homes. You need a home, but you don't need a 3-floor huge house or anything. You don't need mansions, but those are simple examples. I think they're to Muslims, and it's unfortunate. But really, again, coming back to the weddings, this is one of the big is the overspending on weddings. Now, I was talking about earlier with the unnecessary events that follow the walima, but the actual walima itself. Also, unfortunately, I rarely see Muslims adopt the proper Islamic etiquette of what the walima is supposed to be. Very rare. And because of this reason, I personally do not go to most walimas that I'm invited to, because I always ask ahead of time, all right, is there going to be a separation between men and women? The moment they say no, I'm like, I'm sorry, I cannot come. Because for some reason we think that, oh, I've received an invitation and sunnah to accept these invitations. The invitation is for violating Islamic rulings, Islamic principles, then we should not be going, regardless if it's a friend or it does not matter. We should not be going to the events when it is a violation of Islamic principle. We should not be attending that because we are condoning this if we're a part of that, right? And subhanAllah, this is coming from my own personal opinion, but I feel like our shuyukh and imams don't talk about this enough. This is just my personal opinion. Maybe I'm wrong, but I really feel like I don't hear this enough in khutbahs and lectures and all that, because in Islam, the nikah and walima is so simple. So simple. It's so beautiful. Right? The nikah is from the girl's side and it should be done in the masjid. This is the best way to do it. Right? No food, no crazy celebration, just a khutbah, and that's it. Alhamdulillah. Now the two families are conjoined and the couple are now married officially. Right? The walima is from the groom's side, and he should. The idea is that you invite everyone, even if all you can afford to give them is dates. This is from the Sunnah, right? Means that you do not have to go excessive. Yes, if you can feed your guests, then do feed your guests. But what's more important is that your guests are there and that you follow the Islamic principles. This concept of having men and women no longer be separated at weddings is subhanAllah. It's I don't know where this came from and at what point this became introduced into our cultures, but it's in every culture now. Like I said, I've been to Muslim weddings and I see that they're not separating, and I said I can't take this anymore. I just leave. I can't deal with that. There's no shame. There's no that we're okay with this lack of separation. This is not how we were grown up, and yet for some reason on the day of the walima we are okay with throwing Islam out the window. Men and women are mixed, and we waste so much money on so many things, from not just decoration but the amount of food, the excessive amount of food, and so much food gets thrown away. I mean, how many sins are committed at a single walima, subhanAllah? And we think by reciting Quran at the beginning of the walima that this nullifies all of our sins. I never understood that. We start these walimas with Quran recitation, but only to follow up with so much sin, with music and dancing and singing. And what kind of mockery are we making of the Quran? What kind of mockery are we making of Islam when we do these things? So, as Muslims, we must understand that the nikah and walima are meant to be simple. And I've talked about this before, but there's even research done by non-Muslims that a simple wedding means that there's a higher chance of the couple remaining together. Well, because they don't focus on the materialism, right? But weddings in which an extravagant amount was spent, and the numbers was they had some numbers. I think it was above 20,000 or something like that, or 15,000. I don't remember, but they said if the number had crossed this threshold, then there was a more major focus on the materialism, and that speaks to the couple themselves that they are willing to go the route of materialism. This is never good for the marriage. You know, a lot of marriages break apart because of materialism. And so, subhanAllah, it's just that non-Muslims have seen this, but in Islam we already had the solution. It was already there 1400 years ago. We don't adhere to it, unfortunately. We do not look at it. And our Imams and Khatibs, what do? They attend these weddings. They attend these weddings. And so I remember my father, he had gone to a walima, and he was actually lied to. Someone had lied to him, telling him that it'll be separated, and it wasn't separated. It was very upsetting. My father had traveled, different states just for this walima and nikah walima, and when he was there, he found the sheikh himself who was doing the nikah. He was there. He did the nikah there. It was at a hotel. It wasn't even at a masjid. It was at a very fancy hotel. My father went up to him and asked him, you know that the nikah should be done in the masjid. Why are you doing it here? Why are you attending this when you know that this is wrong? That they spent, probably $50,000 on this whole setup for the walima. Why are you a part of this? And the sheikh's response, dead silence. He just put his head down. Why? Because he knew that he was wrong. He knew that he shouldn't have been there to begin with, and he knew that the nikah should be in the masjid. But he didn't put his foot down. And you find that many imams are like this. They don't want to say that, no, I will only do nikah in the masjid. Most imams won't be like, so like, oh, you want to go nikah somewhere else? Okay, I'll follow you there. It should not be like that. It should be done in the masjid. This is how the sunnah is. We should be following the sunnah of it. It makes no sense to have a nikah done in a hotel. There's no logic behind that. There's nothing in Islam about that. But unfortunately, like I said, our imams and khatibs and shuyukh, they don't speak about this topic. For some reason, we're okay with throwing Islam out the window on the walima day. It just doesn't make sense to me, but this is how Muslims have become. That we don't take Islam seriously. We think that, oh, it's the wedding, it's okay to spend extra money. It's okay if you don't really follow Islam that day. It's just a wedding. It's only a one-time thing. No, Islam follows all aspects of our lives, even for those one-time things, especially weddings. So we have to ask ourselves, why is it that we do this? Why are we people who are okay with wastefully spending our money and our resources? Why are we okay getting things that we do not need to begin with? It's because it really comes down to a few things, and it stems from the jahl, the ignorance in our hearts. But it's this. There's different reasons, quite often I've seen people who feel like they have to live up to a certain standard, whether it be set by family members or their community members or their friends, whoever. But I have met Muslims who have purchased cars that they cannot afford. And so they go into an interest-based debt to keep a car that they cannot afford. And why? Because others around them have the same car or better. So they feel like they have to live up to this image. And it may sound ridiculous, but this is very common. And the sin of interest, as we know from the Quran, is very, very heavy. You are making enemies of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Rasulullah when you take interest. Right? Whether it be accepting or giving, you're making enemies of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Rasulullah. And subhanAllah, we take that so lightly that we're willing to take interest just to live up to a certain standard. So what are we doing? We're showing off, we're taking pride. What is the reason we have the need to do this? What is our reasoning for our need to show off our wealth? What is our reason that we have to get things that we do not need or go excessive and end up hurting ourselves? I mean, we're not pleasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when we do any of these things. Right? We are only disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We're only going to suffer in the hereafter when this happens. And if you go into an interest-based debt, then you're wrong. So what is the reason we do this? SubhanAllah. هذا واستغفر الله ولكم ولسائر المسلمين فاستغفروه انه هو الغفور الرحيم. Alhamdulillah wa salatu ala Rasulullah wa alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. So to wrap up this khutbah, inshallah, we are obviously not perfect. We are not meant to be perfect as Muslims. This is in the Quran that we are not meant to be perfect. We are meant to sin. So this khutbah is a reminder for myself first and foremost, as well as for everyone else here, inshallah, that tabdir and israf, it is something that all of us are guilty of at some point in time. There's no way you can have 100% complete control over this. We are meant to sin. We are going to forget this, right? But this is a reminder for us Muslims that we try our best to control ourselves, especially knowing that we have the holiday seasons coming up, whether you're traveling or you have a shopping list you have to go through. Just keep in mind that Allah comes first and foremost, right? And what's the best way to cleanse ourselves or keeping this discipline within us of our wealth? It's through the infaq, not nifaq, infaq, which is spending in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Giving your money for the sake of Allah, giving your money to the masjid. The masjid needs your money, right? Best Buy doesn't need your money, but the masjid needs your money. So keep in mind that the more we spend on ourselves, the higher chances we have of introducing the nifaq, the hypocrisy into our hearts. But the more we spend for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the higher chance we have of cleansing our hearts from that hypocrisy. So it's very important that if we want to instill the discipline in ourselves, and discipline is something we are always going to be struggling with from the time we are children to the time we die, because we always will want something, and we have to learn to control that desire. We think that children are the only ones having trouble controlling their desires, but no, it goes well into adulthood and it goes all the way into old age, right? You have money, you want to pay something, you want to do something. It's there. It's our nature. This is how Allah made us. But that doesn't justify our wrongdoing, right? We have to first recognize what we do is wrong. We have to recognize if we've committed a sin, we have to recognize that it's a sin, not justify it. Like, oh, well, I could use this sometime eventually. No, you have to recognize that it is wrong, because if you don't recognize it's wrong, then how can you ask Allah for forgiveness, right? You only ask Allah for forgiveness if you know you've done something wrong. So you have to first recognize that it's a sin, right? If you spent more than you need to, or bought something you didn't need to, then you ask Allah for forgiveness. And don't make the plan that, oh, I'm going to buy this thing and then I'll make double later. This is a joke. We don't do this. Don't go this route, please. So we have to recognize the sin. We have to ask Allah for forgiveness and then give money for the sake of Allah. This is the best solution we can have, in terms of cleansing ourselves and controlling ourselves, and instilling a discipline within ourselves. Allah says in Surah Al-Furqan that the true believers, the true slaves of Allah. He doesn't say true believers, he says the true slaves of Allah are those who, when they spend, they do so not excessively, right, or sparingly. That they are moderate. They are justly moderate, meaning like it is justified their moderate spending. They don't go excessive and they don't intentionally go too little. They have a moderate amount, and so we can go into another time the details what that really means, the moderation. But this is coming from us that this is the true slave of Allah, and this is what we should try to attain. Inshallah. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى ال محمد كما صليت على ابراهيم وعلى ال ابراهيم اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى ال محمد كما باركت على ابراهيم وعلى ال ابراهيم في العالمين انك حميد مجيد. Ya Allah, please help strengthen our iman and make us and our families among the mu'mineen and muttaqeen. Ya Allah, please help us control ourselves and our nafs and our desires. Ya Allah, please guide us to the right path. If you have guided us, please keep us on the right path. Ya Allah, please protect us from the fitna of the Dajjal. Ya Allah, please help ease the suffering of the Muslims around the world. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون فاذكروني أذكركم واشكروا لي ولا تكفرون. أقيموا الصلاة.
الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
Allahu Akbar. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله من حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. الله أكبر. سمع الله من حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
Alaikum, brothers and sisters, inshallah, just few minutes, just listen to your things. Thankful to our Imam, inshallah, he pointed out some important things, and as he mentioned, that we have to take care of it in every aspect of our life. Just a couple of things quickly, we have, time is changing, this Sunday morning. So remember, we don't change the Jummah time, we change the other times correspondingly by the hour. The change is going to happen. So remember that next Jummah when you come in, it still will be same, but the other prayer time is going to change. Also make dua. We are trying to raise the money for our heating oil. We raise more than what we need. The minimum is 250, but inshallah we raise it more so that in case the winter is severe, that we will have the money. Inshallah, make dua. And make dua for our Imam again. That mashallah, he pointed out many of the things which we are aware of it. That I hope Allah Ta'ala save us from that. Jazakallah khair for listening. Waalaikum salam, brother.